Welcome. I'm going to turn it over to Anna Mangum, Regional Manager with IES, for introductions and a brief overview of IES services. Anna?
Thank you so much, Susan. I greatly appreciate having a chance to host this webinar. Thank you for all who have signed up and are joining us live and those who are watching after the fact. As Susan mentioned, I am a regional manager here at NC State Industry Extension Services, and I've actually been a part of this organization for close to 20 years. It is a passion of mine to service the state of North Carolina and its business and industry. And CMMC and some of the topics that will be covered today is incredibly important to understand if you are engaging in the Department of War's supply chain. I have personally engaged with many a client who have gone through this process, who are required to go through this process, and it can be quite confusing. So thank you for joining us for a little bit more knowledge and education on the subject. As Susan mentioned, before we get into the weeds of today's details, I want to go over a little bit about who we are as an organization and better introduce Brian. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So those of you who are unfamiliar with IES, we are part of NC State University and the College of Engineering. We are a public-private financial model, and we also not only represent the state of North Carolina through the university, we also represent U.S. commerce in servicing the state's manufacturing with subject matter expertise. However, manufacturing makes up the majority of our client base. We do have other client areas that we service, and you can see some of those listed there for other industries served. Next slide. Outside of our expertise that we're going to showcase to you today with Brian Vigna, we have experts in a lot of other areas. We're very proud of those. I actually came from one of those teams before I joined as a regional manager for the organization. Many of you might know us very strongly for our presence in the lean process optimization world, but that's not all of what we do. We do have very strong subject matter expertise in the quality department, which some of you might also have engaged with. But we do a lot of other services in business growth and innovation, providing marketing solutions. We also are highly engaged in leadership and organizational development coaching. If your organization is going through a change right now, that might be some services that you could be interested in, predominantly in our TWI model or training within industry model. We also support and with certain situations also provide free counseling and services in the supply chain optimization and supplier matching area. And last but not least, the team I came from, workplace health and safety. We are the OSHA Training Institute for this section of our country. Very proud of that and support very strong, healthy work environments. So with that being said, I want to introduce my colleague, Brian Vigna. Brian is a small business IT and cybersecurity expert. He is engaged with well over 50 different clients that have gone through the CMMC process. As mentioned, he and I were on a call this morning working hands-on with a manufacturer here in North Carolina who is a very important DoD or DOW customer. And this process for them has been, I'll just say, grueling. I asked of their advice, what can I share with those joining the webinar today? And they said, information is critical and understanding is critical. The terminology and understanding both, kind of looking up the supply chain and down the supply chain, what your requirements are. Sometimes they have also shared that some of their customers who are higher up in the supply chain with DOW weren't even clear on their status or weren't even clear on what their subcontractors needed to be. So communicating both up and down that supply chain for those requirements in the CMMC model is absolutely critical. So I'm grateful that you're joining and here to listen and learn from Brian Vigna. With that being said, I'll pass it over to Brian.
Hey, thanks, Anna. Appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Today is the third in our three-part series of CMMC. Really, we are geared towards level 1 here, but we're discussing CMMC as a whole. So you'll hear me talk about CUI as well as FCI. You'll hear me mention level 2, We really won't talk about level 3. There's a good reason for that. It's a very, very small subset of DoD or DoW contractors who are level 3, and those folks work directly with the government in the DIBCAC environment, so government-led assessments. They know who they are because the government identifies them and works directly with them. So just keep in mind, we'll be talking about both level 1 and level 2 today. Now, since I last met with everyone here, there has been a pretty big change, and not in your presenter, but in July 13th, so last month, just about a month ago, the DoD or DoW released an immediate press release. And what they told us was there are suspensions for 60 days, but those suspensions are very specific. What was suspended? The third party certification. So, meaning you don't have to work with a third party, you can do full self assessment even after what was meant to just be a 60-day period. We are going to talk more about what we know, but also what we can guess based on some of the press releases. So, in general, we know that the two things that were taken away are future timelines. So we know on November 10th of 2026, there was going to be a new phase where companies were going to have to use third-party certification. So that phase is effectively eliminated. They also, if you read carefully in all the press releases, they say all future dates, meaning phase 2, phase 3, all the way out through 2028, which had been scheduled, are all in effect paused or maybe permanently removed. So we know that November 10th, no longer a big important date for us at this time, and we know that third-party requirements, that C3PAO, Certified Third Party Audit Organization, also currently not required. So let's get more into what we know about today. So this is based directly off the press releases, and there were a few press releases. There was the initial short press release, and then there were two follow-ups, and then there were a few interviews done with folks that are part of the federal government, the DoD, DoW. So here's what I was able to glean from them and from talking to CMMC assessors as well as C3PAOs. So a 60-day pause was put in place. They called it a top-to-bottom review of the entire certification program. That means no one is safe in terms of could they eliminate program pieces? Could they eliminate roles and responsibilities? Could they eliminate some of the requirements on you, the contractors? Yes, the answer to that is yes, because they're saying it's top-down, it's everyone involved. They've assembled a task force. The task force is designed to provide recommendations for a reformed framework that prioritizes speed to capability, lowers barriers, and replaces prohibitive third-party compliance models with scalable, realistic security measures. Okay, so what can we take from that? First off, they specifically mention replacing prohibitive third-party compliance models. So we know that they took away for now the third-party requirement. We know that they are specifically calling out third-party requirements, and they're referring to it as a more scalable and realistic security measure. What's still happening during this interim period? Well, they're still going to enforce the NIST 800-171 rules, aka the DFAR clause that should be in your contract, that FAR and CUI protection. Those are both still in effect. They remain in effect both during this 60-day period and moving forward. They were very specific about that because one of the first questions I got for small businesses was, so do we not have to do this? Is it off? Can we forget about it? Do we just cancel where we are now? Should we not be worrying about CMMC? The answer to that is no. You should still be thinking about CMMC. You should still be thinking about DFARS clauses that appear in your contract or may appear in future contracts. So all of those cybersecurity requirements that have been in place for close to a decade now are still in place. Okay, that's the biggest key to take away from this. There is a current request for comment. That RFI period is ongoing, but it ends this Friday at noon. So if you're a small business owner, if you have some part in this DoD, DoW world, and you have some feelings about the CMMC program, whether that's it's good and we should keep it, or it's terrible and it costs too much, or we need money, you need to, help us with this. Whatever your comments are, go ahead and submit them now. That RFI is still open and you have a chance to impact what happens next. So go ahead and make your comments. You're allowed to write up to 10 pages of comments. So if you have a lot of thoughts, you can go ahead and write them a full 10 pages about your thoughts and why you either love CMMC, hate CMMC, or think there should be changes. That's what we know. I can now make some guesses. I can make some assumptions. Again, these are based directly off what I've read from government released information and also from speaking to assessors and C3PAOs and other folks in the industry, attending webinars with those that are really close to this program. Being part of a NIST working group that helps to determine the outcome of this 60-day pause. Here's what I've learned. The program's not going away. Something will replace it. It may still be called CMMC, and we really hope that it will because it just adds to confusion. It screws up all the work that's been done, all the guides, the training, the implementation documents. All that stuff has to be updated and changed if they change even just the name or the description of the program. So CMMC is not going away, or at least the underlying principles are not going away. However, the name, who's in charge of it, what agencies are impacted by, all that stuff can change. The third party requirement is the thing I don't want to say most certain, but the thing I feel the strongest about after reading the tea leaves is that third party is either going to go away, it's either going to be government sponsored, or it's going to drastically be reduced. And that might mean only having to engage once with a third party auditor. That might be choosing random companies to audit. That might be only auditing companies who are dealing with the most sensitive type of CUI. So there's definitely going to be changes to third-party requirements. What exactly they are, nobody knows. A very small group of people who are part of that committee, that reform group, they're the only ones who know, and they probably don't know today. There's still a lot more work to be done. Timelines. Again, in those documents, they were very specific to say not only is this November 10th, 2026 timeline on pause, all future timelines are currently paused and are likely to be replaced with a new timeline for implementation and phased rollout. So it's still very likely that there will be a phased rollout, meaning each year something new will be added, some new requirement will be added. What they are, we don't know today. The continued cyber controls. There will absolutely be a continued effort by the DoD, DOW to remind contractors that they have to have these controls implemented to work with the federal government. If you are a DoD contractor today, you can't be waiting for the 60-day pause to be over. You're still on the hook as of right now. And then the last thing that I can tell you, this 60-day review. Anyone who's expecting to get an answer exactly 60 days after that July 13th pause date, you should not hold your breath. In 2021, there was also a 60-day pause announced. They called it a review back then, a 60-day review. That turned into a 6-month review. They then had 3 full years of rulemaking after the 6-month and the 60 days. So it really was more like 3.5 years until we actually got it resolved. So this is likely not to be resolved in 60 days. That's the bad news here. The good news is you've got a reprieve. If you're a company who said, we really need to get this done, we're really worried about this November 10th deadline, we're not sure if we're going to have to pay for an assessor, a third-party auditor, we maybe want to engage with one, but we don't know. You got a little bit of a break in terms of the timeline, but the requirements are all still there. Final fair warning. A bunch of different companies reached out to me after this pause. I immediately got a wide spectrum of responses. Some were happy, some were sad, and this was the most concerning one. A bunch of different people said to me, we don't have to do it anymore, or we're no longer required to submit anything to SPRS, or I don't think we actually have to even worry about level 2 versus level 1. We should just kind of keep doing what we're doing. Here's your fair warning. There is a clause in these contracts, the DFARS 252-204-720. It says that the DIBCAC, right, their assessment group, can literally show up anytime to your business and demand to see what's under the hood, right? They can audit you at any time. That has actually existed since 2020. So this is not a new one. This is not part of the 60-day pause. But what that means for you is if you were thinking, well, we got some time, no need to worry about this, but you're a current contractor, you have current DoD contracts, they can audit you today. They can audit you next week. They can audit you anytime, regardless of the 60-day pause. So don't think that you're totally off the hook. Next up, DFARS 252-204-721, this one tells us that you must be in continuous compliance. There is a real thought for people that when we get close to an assessment or when we get close to a deadline or when it's time for our annual affirmation, that's the time to be in compliance. That's not true. You have to be in compliance for the entire duration of the contract, not just before affirmations, not 1 week before an annual review, not 1 week before the DIBCAP shows up to your front door. You need to be in continuous compliance. So that's from the day you bid on the contract till the day you complete that contract. So keep that in mind. And then finally, what will they do to you or what can happen to you if one of those two things are not true? You're not in continuous compliance or you fail an audit. Then you can be hit with a False Claims Act. The False Claims Act has been used against defense contractors, fines up to $1 million for large contractors. This is a thing that you could be hit with today. So you could be hit with an audit. They could say, you're not actually compliant. You said you were. You're in the middle of a contract, and here's the penalty. It could exclude you from future work with the government. It could obviously cost you a lot of money. It could damage your reputation. So just be aware of these and know that the 60-day pause didn't eliminate any of these clauses in your contract. What did it do? It removed third-party requirements. That's it. Right now, that's the only thing that has changed is that there is no C3PAO requirement for level 2 on November 10th or beyond, as far as we know. Okay, we're back to the basics here now. Quick reminder of what CMMC is, who it's for, what are these different levels. We know level 1 is for our companies that are at the lowest level. They're handling just FCI or federal contract information. We know that the annual self-assessment has always been what they're required to do. What's inside of there? It's 17 controls that if you break it down, it's actually just over 50 requirements of your business. And they're often known as foundational or basic security requirements. In fact, Anna mentioned we were on a call today with a company who's going through CMMC level 1. And that was one of the things they said was after having worked with the third-party assessor and having worked with a CMMC assessor, they've learned that it's not all that difficult. It's wrapped in all this legalese and all these confusing documents and websites we have to go to upload our data. But the actual list of controls is really pretty simple, and companies are often doing the majority of these just by being a company that has a cyber program or works with a managed service provider. So level 1, very basic cyber hygiene. Do you have passwords? Great. Do you have a policy that says passwords must be unique for all users? Great. You've just hit 2 of your controls. When we move up to level 2, we're in that advanced section. This is the one that's going to hit the most contractors, and this is the one that includes CUI, or Controlled Unclassified Information. In there are 110 security requirements that when you actually break it down comes out to about 300, a little bit over 300. This one was going to require a C3PAO, and no one knows what the future holds, but the answer right now is it does not for today. And if your contract currently says that it requires a third-party audit, you actually have the legal right to reach back out to your prime or to a contracting officer and request that they update your contract to reflect the 60-day pause and the removal of that third-party requirement. So this is an optional item. If you're a level 2 company and you already have a contract that says you must do this annual or this triannual third-party audit, you can get that removed from your contract just to have peace of mind. Now, you'll see at the bottom there was our original timeline. As mentioned in my previous slide, I wanted to keep them in so you saw what they were because they may come back. They may just have different timelines. They may have different names. Currently off. So all of those dates currently on pause. So what level is my business? This is like one of the biggest questions you have to determine before you can really go down this journey. Remember, you can ask your prime, you can ask your contracting officer to clarify if you can't find FAR or DFARS clauses in your current contract. I spoke with someone who maybe is on this webinar today. We're starting to work on some CMMC work together, and they said to me, none of our contracts have DFARS or FARS clauses. We just have an informal agreement, and we've been working for government agencies and been working with the DoD for many, many years, so they trust us and we trust them. Well, you really should reach out and ask for clarification. There's some great language that you can use to request that. And that language is kind of legalese, but it's also basic. It says, because of the CUI requirement in all contracts for DoD, I would like to clarify, does our current contract require me to complete CMMC level 1 or level 2? And I'll share with you a resource after this webinar that includes that legalese language that you can use to ask your prime or your contracting officer, am I level 1? Am I level 2? Am I part of CMMC at all? But you really want to clarify that. Here are some basic examples of FCI. Contract details, building specs not on SAM, project schedules, and communications with a contracting officer. So this is one of the most basic ways to think of it. If you do any business with the DoD, you are probably FCI. Just the fact that you own a contract, have a contract that has a schedule of completion, and you have emails that go back and forth with a contracting officer, that probably puts you at level 1 FCI. Now, if you have engineering drawings, if you have social security numbers, financial data, trade secrets, applicant data, this is CUI, and it should be marked as such. The federal government is the one who should start that marking, and that marking should flow down from prime to subcontractor. Does it always work that way in the real world? No, unfortunately, it doesn't. That's why you need to clarify. You need to check your contracts. You need to ask the right questions to primes and to contracting officers. So, what's inside of level one, which is our key focus today? This is a refresh because I know we've talked about this in our last webinars, but these levels are broken down into what are called control families. These are the groupings of controls that you'll have to go through. So access control, I mentioned two of them earlier, right? The example was, do you have users with passwords? Are those passwords unique amongst your users? Those are examples of access control. There are 15 security practices, which again breaks down to about 50 actual line items. This is a self-assessment. You need to go through this line by line, and you need to not only say, yes, we do, that's met or not met. So you need to check yes, but you also need to put details about the policy. That's how you get it done. And then the evidence. That's how you would prove that you're doing it. When I say put it down, where do I mean? In a system security plan, in a document that contains information about your hardware, your software, your users, your policies, and then it talks about the proof, the how you would show an assessor if they did come and audit you that these things are true. You'll see at the bottom I mentioned POAMs. These are project of actions and milestones. They are not permitted at level one. In the past, POAMs were permitted, and they simply meant that we had not completed one of our security requirements, but we had a plan, a goal, a timeline to get it done. Not permitted in level one. So you can pretty much forget about them if you're a level one company. So what do you need to do? What are the actual controls if we break it down and look under the hood? This is it. Here they are. This is the controls. If you read through them, they're actually pretty simple. I don't think anybody would look through these and say, I need to hire a cyber guy. I need to get with a company to help me understand if these are true. Like, for example, this is a really simple one, but I always point it out. Control information posted on publicly accessible systems. Do you have a website that your company uses that's out on the public internet that people can come and learn about your company or send a contact note to you? Well, would you post anything there that was private government information that was part of your contracting work with the federal government? I sure hope not, but that's all it means, is literally, do you do that today? Can you prove it to us? And do you have a policy that states that your employees, aka your users, would not do that? So some of these are really basic and really simple. Obviously, some of them are a little bit more detailed when we go and look at the actual underlying principles of each one of these. So you'll have to know a little bit about IT to understand physical access to systems and equipment to authorize staff, but they are pretty basic at level one. Don't get scared off by CMMC. You can handle much of this in-house. Level two is a different beast. It includes everything that's in level one, but with much more depth on those concepts, and then adds many more security practices. So you can see the list has grown quite a bit. We know that self-assessment is still going to be allowed. So even though it's complex, it's large, it's different than level one, we know now that moving forward, at least for the time being, that a third-party requirement is gone. You can do this in-house, which would save time and money. So are these assessments an annual requirement? Again, this is one of those slides I have to I want to show you because I want to show you what we know today, but I have to really caveat it over and over and say, we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in the near future. We know that as the 60-day pause goes, we still have to have these security requirements in place. We still have to be ready for an audit. We should still be doing all the work. No one should quit on this process. No one should throw out all the work they've done. You shouldn't delete that SSP that's halfway done. Keep working, but know that all the timelines, the deadlines, the annual requirements, the triannual requirements, they're likely to all change. So don't invest too much time right now in worrying about what's going to happen in 1 year or 3 years. Worry about getting this work done and being ready for whatever comes next. Okay, so let's talk about how to do that. So some tips or tricks. These are general tips or tricks for you as a contractor who's working with either FCI or CUI. So these apply to both level one and level two. Number one, start asking your prime or the government, the CO, to mark FCI and CUI. Again, I'm going to share a document with you which gives specific legal language that you can use to request this from them. So if today you tell me, I've worked with the government for many years, they never said FCI to me, they never said CUI, I've never seen this in a contract, start requesting, start asking them to put it in your contract. Ask them to type up a note that says, no, you do not have FCI or CUI. That's a great answer to get as well. That will preclude you from doing a lot of other work that you might have started doing just assuming that you have FCI or CUI. So ask the right questions. It is your responsibility to ask if they don't deliver. Yes, the government should be telling us this. Yes, our primes should be telling us. But in the end, if you end up with data that's CUI and you don't legally reach back out and say, hey, this isn't marked as CUI and I'm not ready to handle it, was sent to a system that's not CUI, guess who's in trouble? You for having the CUI on a system that is not protected. So please reach out to primes, reach out to partners, reach out to people in your supply chain and ask about FCI, ask about CUI, ask about DFARS clauses. Just really knock that door down until you get a good answer. Number two, if data is shared with you and it's unlabeled, you can immediately reach back out and use, again, this legal language, and you can just save this document and use it as a template. And every time one of these happens, you can use this legal language. And basically what you're saying to them is, I am going to assume this is not CUI because you have not marked it as CUI. It is currently on a system that is not designed to handle CUI. Please let me know an immediate answer if this is CUI and was not properly marked. Again, you're legally protecting yourself from some action that might happen in the future. So we want our primes, we want our contracting officers labeling CUI. We want to know it's CUI inside of our environment, and we want to take appropriate action. So what is appropriate action? Internal markings. You can see number 3 there. Mark all of your FCI and CUI internally. Make sure that users understand that CUI and FCI comes with its own special requirement, that there are devices, systems inside of your environment that it's appropriate to handle FCI and CUI. There are storage places, for example, cloud storage, on-site storage, flash drive storage, that can be appropriate or cannot be appropriate based on how you've designed your network. For example, if you've created a one computer enclave, you have a single computer that you handle all of your CUI work, all of your federal contracting work on, and someone sends it to another person in your office, it goes to their email, and then they share it with another person, and they upload it to a shared drive. You really can't do that. You have a one computer enclave, not just on paper, but in how you actually handle the data. So go look at your workflow, make sure that you know where this data comes in, where it is worked on, that's the active part, and where it is stored, that's the at-rest part of this data protection. So label and ensure that it does actually sit on the systems that are meant to handle CUI and FCI. Lastly, system verification. If a system gets CUI and it is not an authorized system, right? It's not in your enclave, it's not in your boundary, it's not listed in your SSP, your system security plan, you should very quickly alert the person. That's if it's a prime, a contracting officer, an agency, alert them right away that it reached a system that was not authorized, and then let them know it is going to be deleted. So if you do this, again, you're legally protecting yourself. And I'm going to share with you a document that has the exact language that you should use to do this. So if you get CUI and it's not marked, ask if it's CUI. If you get something and you know it's CUI and it comes to you in a way that it shouldn't, delete it and notify them that you've done that. These are really all the tips and tricks that help protect you from a legal standpoint. So be careful. You're not just looking to keep your contracts, you're looking to stay out of court. You're looking to avoid fines in those False Claims Act. Okay, some scoping tips. Again, people, technology, facilities. These are the questions I ask. I ask a lot of questions when I get on calls with people and they say, hi, I want to work with you on CMMC stuff. I don't really know where to start. This is my immediate kind of 3-part process. Who works on this data? How many people do you have in your company? Does everyone handle it? Could anyone access it? So even if somebody tells me we only have a team of 5 people out of 50 who are going to handle this government contracting work, my immediate next answer is, well, who can access it? Are there IT people in your company that can access it because they can access all your systems? They can remote into those systems? Uh-oh, they're in scope. Can a secretary or an administrative assistant access it just for ease so they can quickly find things for a boss or a coworker? Uh-oh, they're in scope. So do you have third-party people who work with you? Do you have contractors who come in and do just a specific job? Do you have a janitorial service who comes in and they can see drawings and schematics in your office? Uh-oh, they're in scope now. So people, think about the people. That's everyone who touches in any way this FCI or CUI data. They are in scope unless you can make a change to get them out of your scope. Your technology. So everything in your technology, everything in your physical footprint, as well as your cloud footprint that handles, stores, processes any FCI or CUI is in scope. So that can be folks who are outside of your company. For example, a managed service provider who has remote access. Okay, everything along that path the computer that they back up that data to that's on their site or in their own cloud, that's all in your scope. If you have somebody who maybe does hardware work for you, they come in and they physically take computers, they remove them from your office, they repair those computers, they add more RAM to those computers, they update a hard drive, whatever that might look like, those physical devices, if they contain CUI or FCI, they're in scope. So technology, really think about your technology. And finally, your facilities. Um, when I talk to people, a lot of times they tell us, we have 5 sites, but we're only doing this type of work at one of the sites. I have to always ask the next question. What is the connection between those 5 sites? Is there a line where a person who's in site A can reach site B and site C? Can they remotely access other computers? Is there a shared server that all the sites can access? Those would all be examples where you've currently got it designed so everyone's in scope. So think carefully about your number of facilities, how they're connected, who can access what from those different facilities. Again, if your data goes to a SOC, a security operations center, as part of some sort of managed service agreement, beware that data is still in scope if it contains FCI and CUI. So that security operations center, that SOC, that cloud environment, that would also have to be in your scope. So just beware of that. The people, the devices, the facilities, they are all potentially in scope. Of course, you can change that. You can make changes that reduce that footprint and make your life easier for the CMMC process. But you need to look at what you have today and start to think about the people, the technology, and the physical facilities. Okay, some scoping tips. Again, we're talking about how to reduce our scope in most cases. That's really the key here. We don't want to do our entire company. It was probably how the CMMC program was designed, was to force companies to change their entire way of doing things and to improve their cybersecurity. But it's just too complicated. It's too demanding. It's too expensive to do. So what we really need to do is just be thinking about the devices that process, store, and transmit FCI or CUI. Remember, process means accessed, entered, edited, manipulated in any way. So if you've got a computer and you can open up this document and view it, that computer's in scope. If you store it on a flash drive and you share it with a teammate, a coworker, that flash drive's in scope. If it's being transmitted, use an email system and you share a PDF or a document or a schematic, a drawing, everything in that path is part of your scope. So earlier today, when we were on that call with the assessor, that was the first piece of advice that they gave when Anna asked that question. She said, what would be your advice to somebody just starting this process? The very first piece of advice that we were given was fully understand your workflow. Really think carefully about your workflow and draw it out, map it out. It doesn't have to be a visual diagram. At first, it can just be names of people. It can be names of sites. It can be names of physical systems. It can be about where you print data, where that gets stored. So start to really think about your workflow. Who does the contracting work? How do they secure the contract when it gets to you? Who do they share it with? Who has access to that contract? Once the data is created, who has access to it? Is it on physical drives? Is it printed? Is it in the physical mail to anyone? Be very careful to understand your workflow before you begin this process. Okay. Out of scope. What's out of scope? These specialized assets. So if you have assets in your environment, for example, if you work in an environment that has many large pieces of machinery that have some sort of human machine interface, right? You can go up and you can press buttons to start this process on an assembly line or a conveyor belt. You can turn the machine on. You can check some information about the machine, but there's no way for you to install updates, configure cybersecurity, change the IP address of that device. It's out of scope. So that's good news for people who say, I have all sorts of technology from all different eras and generations. Not all of it can be connected to my modern SIEM, and I can't always access it. I can't get updates. I can't check its security posture. Well, the good news is it's out of scope. You still need to document it. You need to have a list of all those devices. You need to have an owner of those devices, somebody who's in charge of managing them, but you do not have to consider it an in-scope asset. So that's good news. For level 2, almost everything is the exact same here. We're just changing the word FCI to CUI. What's a little bit different? Inventory all assets, right? So even if they're those specialized assets, you still need to have them all inventoried, document those assets, and then provide network diagrams that tell us where those assets live, how they connect, whether or not they process, store, or transmit CUI. So you do have to have a network diagram at level 2. I would suggest it at level 1, but at level 2, it's a requirement. Okay. Specialized assets, remember, they're in scope at level 2, but they only have to be protected by existing policies, not assessed against CMMC requirements. So it's a little bit of a tricky language there. In scope, not assessed against CMMC level 2 requirements. Confusing, but the best I can understand what they meant is do your best to protect them. Do what you can. Use the policies you have in your office to keep those things safe, but we know that they can't always be part of a CMMC assessment because they can't work the same way that these new modern devices work. So what should it look like? I talked to you about that map, right, where you diagram out. This is a great way of understanding your workflow. These can be as detailed or undetailed as you want. They can be drawn by hand and you could take a picture and upload that with your phone camera. They can be done in Visio. They could be done in Microsoft Paint. They can be done anywhere you want, however you want to do them. There are even software packages that will map out your network and will create one of these diagrams for you. You may already have this capability today with software that you currently use, like an SAP solution. Why is this helpful? Not only is it required, but it helps us understand the workflow. Who touches it? Where does it live? Does it go out to the internet? Is it accessible from our Wi-Fi network, our guest, our public network? All those are great things to be able to understand when you make this diagram. So what should you do? Start with a self-assessment. You've done some of your scoping work, so you understand the devices, the people, the physical sites that you have. Next up, start to go through your self-assessment. How do you do this? There are lots of templates. There are physical printouts you can use to do this. Today, as we went through our CMMC call, which is a weekly standing call with that company, we have a crosswalk sheet, which has all the level 1 controls written out on there, and it has our current status. It has a very brief section where we write down what evidence we already have, and then we write little notes to ourselves that says, still need to blank. We need to get this set up in Active Directory. Still need to find a way to add all those users to one group, whatever that might be. So do your self-assessment today, whether that's a questionnaire, which is a common way that these companies do it, these cybersecurity companies, a digital template, also very helpful because it can be edited, or an automated tool where you answer questions and then it spits out a report for you. However you do it does not matter. Just get started today because the sooner you start, the sooner you'll understand how far away you are from completing this process, and really that will inform what you need to do next. Remember, your status is either met or not met for each one of these controls. It doesn't make a lot of sense to say met, but, and then write a big note to yourself. We haven't actually put it in, but we bought the new firewall. We're going to install it in September. So I'm going to write met, and then I'll just put a little note for myself. Be realistic, be honest with yourself, keep good notes. There's no reason to cook the books internally. This is your data. It's for you only. This is not going to be part of any sort of audit. This is not going to be turned over to the government. That's not how it works. This self-assessment is simply for you to understand your current posture. So take down copious notes on what you do have in place, what you don't have in place, but just be really cut and dry with the met or not met. Okay? Remember, you can perform as many assessments as needed. So one crazy way to do this would be do your self-assessment and then fix one thing at a time and do a self-assessment again. That's probably the longest way to do it, but if that's the way you like to do it, that's great. Or you could do your self-assessment, cut out the items that you haven't completed, and now just look at that list as your crosswalk, and then just keep chopping that list down until there's only a few line items left and you feel like you're almost home. What do those assessment tools look like? Here's the one that CSET puts out. This is a government-created tool that is downloaded to your computer. It's not an online tool. So I want to be sure I say that because a lot of folks would say, government created, and I'm going to go in there and type in information about myself and my self-assessment. Here's the good news. This is a offline tool. You can disconnect your computer from the internet. You can unplug that physical wire. You can turn off Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and anything else you got going, and you can run this as many times as you want. What does it do? It allows you to go through not only CMMC level 1 and level 2, but a variety of other cybersecurity standards. And it gives great information and detail about how to accomplish them, what each control means, who it impacts. It even can provide software recommendations for what type of software you might use to get this done. And then it has a place for you to go and fill in your information so you can take notes as you go. These are awesome tools. They're government created. They have the current policies. They're really, really easy to use and 100% free. So why would I use that versus a printed out type of questionnaire? Really, it's just this, that you can go back and you can edit it later. You can, continue to work on that. You can continue to update and change your answers. You can share that with others. This is an offline version that is a template that you could print out and do by hand. You could do, PDF on your computer, however you might do it. The lack of automation is the big downside here. At the end, this doesn't spit out a report. You just have all the answers, and now you have to go and take that to your Excel sheet or take that to another questionnaire and, take those answers and transfer them one to the other. That's the downside here. Otherwise, it's the exact same. Where do you submit this information when you're done? Before I move on, I do also want to say, and I'm going to show you this at the end, this is the CSET one. Project Spectrum has a very similar tool to this one, and Project Spectrum is kind of the preferred one that the CMMC program refers you to because they help stand up Project Spectrum. Very similar to this one. So if you hear me mention Project Spectrum, very, very, very similar process to what you're seeing here. And I'll pull that tool up at the end so you can get an idea of what it looks like. So now you've gone through, you've collected all your data, you've done your self-assessment, you feel like you're fully done with this process. What's up next? It's to actually submit the information to SPRS. Now, submitting at level 1 is like a 5 to 10 minute process. If you've already created your SPRS account, you're already ready to go on there, 5 to 10 minute process. If you've never been on SPRS before, it's probably more like a 20 to 30 minute process. And part of that is because you have to set up your account. You have to enter some information about your business, about the type of work that you do, your cage code, etc. Now, if you're level 2, the process is a little bit longer because, again, you're answering the yes, no, the met, not met for 320 controls, not 50. So it is a longer process if you're level 2, but it's not really more complex. It's just a little bit more work. I attended a webinar earlier this week just about how to use SPRS, and it can be a little complex, but the good news is they do a really good job on their website of showing you how to use the tool. So before you actually would start entering your data, I highly recommend it. If you just go to SPRS, you'll see right on the front page, there's a big box that says CMMC. Click that box, and when you do, it shows you 3 or 4 different videos and templates, guides that walk you through how to set up an account, how to enter your data, how to do annual affirmation, how to submit this. All that stuff is in there. They have both videos and they have text-based guides on how to do this. So there really is great information out there on how to use SPRS. There's a little bit of a learning curve as you get started there, but once you feel comfortable with it, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to see those control families at the top, like AC, access control. Then you're going to see each line item, like access control, level 2, 3.1.1. You'll go through, you'll click met or not met, and that's it. It's really straightforward. So once you get over that initial hump of how do I create an account, how do I enter my cage code, the actual process of submitting your score, half an hour max. That's really it. So don't be afraid. This is the easiest part of the journey. The hard part was the scoping and actually getting the work done and compiling all the evidence. Remember your annual affirmation. So each year, you will still need to have a senior official, aka the affirming official, go in there and click a box and say, yes, we promise that everything we've uploaded here in the supplier performance risk system is true. It is valid and it has not changed since last year, from the last time that we did this. So every year you have to go back in there and you have to say, still true. I still put my name on this. I still promise that everything I said last year is still true this year. Do not wait until there's 1 week or 1 day before your annual affirmation. Get started maybe 3 weeks or 1 month before, or better yet, set a monthly or quarterly process where you meet with a small team of folks who understand your CMMC process and make sure that everyone feels comfortable with your annual affirmation. I'd highly recommend a quarterly process to meet to talk about this once you've completed your initial CMMC work, right? What are you doing in that quarterly process? You're letting people speak up and tell you, has there been a major change in policy or procedure? Has there been new hardware or software acquisition that's changed your process? Has there been any sort of breach or any issues that you might want to know about before you get close to this deadline? Because the worst thing that could happen is a week before you engage all those people inside of your company and say, hey, is everything still good? Am I good to go? And somebody informs you, actually, we've completely changed how we do this process. I'm not sure what you need to do there, but here's how we do it now. Well, now you've got a week to update your SSP, to create new documentation, to be sure that you can prove it, to fill out this questionnaire. So it's a lot of work crammed into a short period of time. So set reasonable timelines to get this work done before the deadline. What are some of those changes that would require you to start a new CMMC process? This is the biggest one, major changes to environment. So for example, a new physical facility. We bought a new shop down in Henderson and we're doing half of our DoD work down there. Okay, that means new people, new devices, new processes. We've got to document that. We've got to include that in network maps. We've got to understand our workflow and update our documentation accordingly. New cloud environment. This is a huge one. If you store your FCI or CUI in the cloud and you switch your cloud environment, you move to a new vendor, you upgrade your account to a professional, an enterprise version, you have to change that in your SSP. You have to update your documentation. You may have to even create a new procedure, a new process. So be sure that when these things happen, you have a process that alerts everyone who's part of your CMMC workflow. Okay? And then major technology upgrade. This is a really vague one, so only you'll know exactly what this means to your company. But just think of it this way. If a device that currently handles FCI or CUI gets switched out for a new device, you should be thinking about changing your SSP. You should be thinking about updating your SSP. Okay? Doesn't mean it deletes all the other things you've done in the past. Doesn't mean all your procedures or policies have to change. Just means a change is required. Awareness and training. At level 2, it is an absolute requirement. You not only have to do it, and you could be hit with the False Claims Act if you say you're doing it and not doing it, but also you have to prove it. You have to detail who's involved, how you do it, how often you do it. All those things have to be documented. If you're level 1, you absolutely should still have some sort of training in place. Why? It's helpful for your business. It helps to inform people who work as part of FCI and CUI. And most importantly, it's a free way to get your company more secure and reduce both the chance of a breach happening and the cost of a breach. I gave a webinar last year about the cost of a breach, and one of the single biggest determining factors is how quickly companies identify that a breach has occurred. If people don't know what to look for, they don't know how to act when something strange happens, and they don't know who to contact, it is going to cost you much, much more. So the time between when a breach happens and when somebody identifies it and alerts the proper people is incredibly important in how much a breach costs. So start training today. I'm sharing with you today some free resources at the end that can get you started on this journey, but it's limitless. There is an incredible amount of free cybersecurity training out there. And just attending webinars on cybersecurity and current events is also a key way that you can train your people. So if you see webinars on the calendar that you think are helpful, get your folks to attend them. Even if it's not directly part of their everyday job, but they do handle technology, make sure that they're hearing about cyber breaches. Make sure they're hearing about signs and symptoms of a breach and what to look for. Make sure that you've identified an emergency response team. It can be simple. It can just be an IT person and the owner operator of the company if you're a very small business. Know that those are the two people you reach out to if you identify a breach happening. And then have a plan for what they do. Do they unplug that computer immediately? Do they leave that computer on? Do they take screenshots? So talk to your folks when you hire them about cybersecurity. Talk to them on an annual basis. Talk to them if an incident occurs. Talk to them if there's major news in the world of cybersecurity or news in a company that's similar to yours or in an industry that you're part of. Okay? Resources. Here are some of the resources that I've shared in each one of our webinars, and they're all really important. The DoD CMMC website, that's where you can go read the memos. That's where they'll release the findings after the 60-day pause. That's where they'll put any new information about third-party requirements or about timelines and deadlines or phase 2 and phase 3 of the CMMC rollout. It will all be right there. You can read news and clips about it in other places, but the real information is going to be right there on the DoD's website. So start there. Project Spectrum. I referred to it today, and I want to show you what it looks like right now. The Project Spectrum, the best part about it for me is that it actually includes the ability for us to go out and create our own assessment, and then we can keep updating that assessment as we go through it. So if I go to my dashboard here, and it was very easy to create my account, literally just email address, username, I go in, I click CMMC, and I say begin assessment. That's it. It's 2 steps. So once you've created an account, you click in and you say, I want to start an assessment. It goes through, and I'm in a CMMC level 1 assessment, so you can see It's just these few families, just a couple of families here. I can say met, not met, and I can put information. I can actually type in, here's how I met it. I used Active Directory. I used this enterprise management software. I did GCC High. I'm using a Microsoft cloud. So you can tell me exactly how you met it. At the end, you say complete. It spits out a report, and you actually have this living, breathing document that's yours that you can go back and edit as many times as you want. No, this is not being given to the government. No, this is not being reported over to SPRS. So if you go in here today, even if you're a current contractor, you say not met, not met, not met, met, not met, not met, not met, and you go, oh boy, we're not doing great. That's okay. There's nothing bad about that. You're not reporting that information. You're not sharing that information. It's not going to be used against you later in some sort of legalese way. This is just a place for you to go and do this process. So I really want to encourage people, go out and check out Project Spectrum. What else do they have? They also have training. So they have webinars, they have cybersecurity readiness training, they have emergency response training. They also have policies and documentation. So if you go in here, if you drill down deep enough, you will find a place where you can actually get the policies written for you. So if you say, we're starting this journey, but we have no policies written, we're going to have to write 50 policies or 320 policies. Guess what? They actually have them inside of here. You can download these documents, you can cut and paste, you can use them a la carte. So maybe you just need a policy for passwords, or you just need a policy for physical access about users who walk into your environment. It's literally here on Project Spectrum. So I am not paid by Project Spectrum. I'm not part of Project Spectrum, but it's that helpful. It's that good that I refer every customer I deal with. I remind them that it's there and I remind them that it's free. The other thing I mentioned to you earlier was that website, the DoD's website, and I can take you there, but literally that is the place that you'll start if you've never done anything with CMMC. You come here, you can read about these memos, right? This change that's happening. And then most importantly, you can go and look at the resources and find out how to scope. There's a scoping guide. How to self-assess. You can find out what really is CMMC, what constitutes CMMC, what is CUI. You can read all that information right here. So that is great news that it's available to us. Okay, that is it for today. I wanted to close out by letting you know that all of our regional managers are listed here. You can find this on our website. If you see a regional manager in your area and you want to reach out to them, that's a great way to then get in touch with me and get yourself set up to begin your CMMC journey. Okay? I know we have some questions, and I know Anna wants to jump in now. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Brian. So it looks like we've got a couple of questions here. The first I wanted to address came in from Mike Rogers. Mike is asking if information in QuickBooks could be a problem in the CMMC process.
Yeah, if your QuickBooks is connected to the internet, if your QuickBooks backs up to the cloud, if your QuickBooks is a cloud-enabled version, if it features AI, like that's a telltale sign that it's connected to the internet, that it's cloud-based, it's probably backing up your data in the cloud. So I don't have a specific answer because I haven't had a customer who told me they use QuickBooks in part of a CMMC process. But the first answer is go and find out if it's connected to the internet, if it's connected to the cloud, where it backs up your data, and you'll probably get a quick answer to that question. My gut feeling is it most likely does have an impact on your CMMC.
The next question that Mike had for you is deleting the Microsoft Cloud Services a good idea?
Did you say deleting?
Yes, that is what his question referred to.
Okay, so if your FCI CUI data ends up in the cloud, there is a minimum acceptable level for those two places. So if you're FCI, there's a minimum acceptable level of cloud protection, and you'll find that in your contract, in the contract that you have with Microsoft, that service level agreement, that SLA that's buried somewhere deep in an email that you signed up for many months or years ago. In your SLA, and you can go find a current example of their SLA, it will tell you if it meets the requirements. If you're level 2, you're going to have to step up to an enterprise level. So I think the question was, do you have to delete it or is it best to delete it? The answer is no, it's not required or maybe not best practice, but you need to find out if it complies with the CMMC standards at your current cloud level. There are acceptable clouds. You're most likely going to have to pay more to step up to those enterprise level cloud.
Thanks, Brian. And our next question is from Judy. Judy asks if you have set up an account in Project Spectrum. Start there. Oh, this is more, I guess, a comment. Start there to do self-assessment, question mark.
Yeah,
And
if
then
you go there,
step
if you go to
two,
Project Spectrum, you absolutely should start with a self-assessment. Somebody might say, first, I want to like read more and know more and go through some question. I would just do an assessment because it's going to give you a really quick kind of how am I doing? Am I 20% to the way of completing this? Am I 50% of the way? Am I 75% of the way? So I do think it's a great first step. If you're totally like unaware of what CMMC is, you probably need to read the scoping guide first for level one. So if you have really like no familiarity with CMMC, my advice would be to read the scoping guide because as you go through that questionnaire on Project Spectrum, you need to know where to look for those answers. So you need to know what's considered in scope, and that information comes from the scoping guide.
excellent. Thank you, Brian. So Judy, Mike, any others have questions? Now is the time to ask. We've got
Okay.
about 5 minutes remaining. You've got a subject matter expert just sitting here waiting for your questions.
No more questions. No, no. I did want to say we are probably going to come back in November. Not November. Remind me, Susan, are we scheduled for November for our next webinar?
It is
November.
it is
Okay, so
November, I
we're
believe, like the
probably going to come
19th.
back with an update webinar in November. So after this 60-day period ends and we find out new information, I'm going to decide if there's enough new information for us to come back and do another webinar because I want to keep this conversation going, but I don't want to repeat myself over and over. So I want to see what comes out from the federal government, what the DoD, DoW announces to us, and if there's some good information, helpful stuff, we're absolutely going to have a webinar about that stuff. At minimum, we will have an email sent out to everyone who's part of our distribution list just to tell you what we learned from the outcome of that 60-day period.
So Brian, there are a couple of more questions that have come in from Judy and Mike, if you wouldn't mind addressing those as well.
Sure. Let me read those. Should we use CSET tool then Project Spectrum? Judy, that's a great question. They are honestly pretty much identical. So if you used one and you felt comfortable with it, stick with that one. If you created an account in Project Spectrum and you're like, hey, I like the webinars and they've got these free templates and I like it, and they have this tool where I can do it, stick with that one. No need to duplicate your work. Neither has like a big bonus. I would say that CSET, my favorite part about it is when I showed you the tool, you probably noticed all those little icons at the bottom. In CSET, it gives you a bunch of background information on what each control means in like practical down to earth language. That I would say is the biggest advantage of CSET versus Project Spectrum. Project Spectrum, you might have to go Google or look in another document and say, what does that really mean? What is this control talking about? So CSET gives you a little more information. Does Project Spectrum provide a free service to review your existing policy documents to ensure they meet all compliance requirements? Provide a free service to review your existing. So Project Spectrum says that they offer free guidance. How all encompassing that is, how far they would go with you before they would say, hey, no, this is no longer free work. I can't actually answer that. So I'm trying to interpret your question and give you the best answer I can. Free service to review existing policy. I don't know that they would do that for you for free. I think that you're going to have to engage with a CMMC assessor, not necessarily a third party, a C3PAO, but an assessor, somebody who's either a CCP or a registered practitioner, RP. That person can look over your documents and then they can give you a good sense of how they feel about your current compliance. I would say, though, if you have existing policy documents, go upload them. Go use an SSP and start putting them all in your SSP, and you'll have a great document that you can then share with whoever you speak to.
And I believe there was a question right before that that came in from Mike about FCI.
Yes. FCI. So FCI, federal contract information that would not be publicly available on SAM. So in your question, you specifically said, if it is on SAM, is it FCI? The literal definition says information that would not be posted publicly on SAM. So the actual solicitation that's out there that says we need a company to perform X service or to build X product, that is not FCI. But the second you engage with a contracting officer and you actually secure a contract, they send you a contract. That is the part that FCI has created. Hopefully that answers the question. If not, please feel free to elaborate or reach out to us afterwards for more detail.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. We appreciate the thanks.
All right. Brian, thank you so much for a great presentation. And Anna, thank you for hosting and helping us to moderate. And I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.